bedside nurse and educator. She retired in 2014, but continued to work part-time as a critical care educator for Regions Hospital, EMS training EMTs, paramedics, and first responders. She also works for the Department of Public Safety Office of Traffic Safety to increase older driver safety on the road. So yes, 4 part-time jobs, so much for retirement. Has many volunteer jobs and is the geriatric section editor for the Journal of Emergency Nursing. I am so grateful that she has taken time out of her very busy schedule to share some of her great wisdom with us here at Redeemer. Please welcome Dr. Joan Somes. And one quick thing, we will do questions, so I'll pass the mic around when she's finished with her presentation, and then on the table, if you want any topics or speakers for the future, please write them down. Okay, Joni, it's all yours. You want the mic, or, okay.
Yeah, I'm terrible with the other ones. Well, thank you, Joan. It's kind of nice to have another Joan, so I don't have to remember what her name is. It's the same as mine. Although a lot of times I wear a name tag to remember who I am. It's a little crazy sometimes. Well, thank you all for inviting me to come and talk a little bit about On the Road to Safer Senior Driving. As Joan mentioned, I wear 4 hats or 5 hats or 8 hats. I'm not exactly sure how many of them are. But the training that I'm doing today is actually something that went along with the Minnesota Emergency Nurses Association. You often hear about Minnesota Nurses Association, the MNA people. Put emergency in there. And my friend Diane over here is one of the other emergency nurses. You can ask her all kinds of questions as well. But what we learned from the Department of Transportation was there was a grant out there to increase older driver safety on the roads. And because we were a 501c3 organization, we were able to apply for and we were awarded that grant. And I am the person who goes out and does the grant work. I am on the 5th year of doing this because apparently they're happy with what I'm doing. I don't know, but they keep saying, do you want to apply again this year for what it is that you're doing? I got the grant originally in 2019, and you all know what happened in 2020, right? Yeah, made it really hard to get out and do what I wanted to do, which is what I'm doing now, is coming out and speaking with seniors. So I'll share a little bit as we go through what I ended up doing in 2020, and it involved law enforcement. But it gave me an opportunity to go out and learn a little bit more what it was that I could do for seniors and get a little bit more of the data that's out there. Now, Joan said I was supposed to give you a lot of statistics. Do you all love statistics or something? No, me neither, but I will try to give you ones that are relevant. And the first thing I want to just kind of put out there is any age driver can be a crummy driver. And that's the common thing I hear from seniors out there. It's those other people. They're all terrible drivers out there. Fix them and we'll be fine. But what we do know is that as we age, we start to have changes that ultimately lead to our driving behaviors not being as safe as they can be. And ultimately, one of the first graphs I found was very helpful was just the one that looked at in 2008, look at all at the top graph there, they were mostly the teenagers and the 20-year-olds that were dying on the roadways across the United States. But by 2019, it was us. We were catching up. Anybody want to take a guess why it is? All of us baby boomers are now hitting the age of 65, 70, 75, 80, and suddenly there's more of us on the road. We're a lot more independent, and we are out there. So what they actually found was there were more seniors dying on the roadway than teenagers. And you might say, well, that was data from 2019. What we saw happen in 2020, the numbers dropped of seniors dying on the road. And when 2021 to 2023 came around, guess what? It went back up. Now, I tried to say it was because I was out there working on making older drivers safer in 2019, and that's why it dropped in 2020, but I don't think I can use that as a statistical thing. So ultimately, now that I can get out and talk to seniors, I talk about how do we change as we age. You may or may not have figured out the math already. I mean, if I worked in the ER for 40 years, obviously I started when I was 5, and I'm now like 45 or something. I'm actually 71. So I'm right there with all of you. And I'm on the road a lot. Yesterday I had to drive out to Buffalo. One of the jobs that Joan didn't mention is I work for the Department of Health. And I actually do site visits with the small hospitals to see if they're doing their strokes appropriately. One of the days that I got to go out and share this information, and the reason I think I'm here is I was able to talk to the faith community nurses, the parish nurses, and the gals that were there and the guys that were there said, can you come and share this with us so that our seniors know this information? So that's kind of why I'm here today, as I got invited. So let's kind of talk a few more statistics to put it all into perspective. If you look at national data, the number of seniors dying on the roads, and it depends upon which chart and graph and agency you look at. They were looking at age 70 and older. In 2019, about 7,000 seniors died on the road. And what happened was it went down in 2020, and now it's going back up. In fact, more seniors died in 2021 nationally than they did back in 2019. And what we're finding is that number keeps increasing. It just reinforces what that other bar graph showed to me. Here's Minnesota data. Minnesota does publish crash facts. They publish it based on age. And ultimately what we found is those of us who are seniors tend not to drive when we're drunk. We tend not to drive when we've been using drugs. We tend not to speed, although I guess I'm the exception to that rule. We do tend to wear our seatbelts. We tend not to be distracted. However, our numbers are continuing to go up. We saw the number of deaths on Minnesota roads drop in 2019 during COVID. They're going right back up again. So to me, it's important I'm out here talking with you and sharing with you some of the things that we can do to be safer on the road. If you need a few more statistics, we're almost done. But it was to kind of point out the number of injuries in older adults related to crashes, and we call them crashes because accidents imply they're not preventable. Crashes imply that we could do something to make us a little safer. But the number of seniors that were injured in 2001 was 8% of all the injuries, and by 2022 it was 20% of all the injuries. Now some of the statisticians don't like that data. They go, oh, you didn't adjust it for the number of older drivers, blah, blah, blah. It's still a lot of seniors being injured, and the number of deaths have almost doubled. And in fact, in 2023, I was able to get Minnesota numbers. 413 people died on Minnesota roads last year. That sounds like a lot of people, but guess what? 133 of those are over the age of 65. That's 1 out of 3 people dying on the road were our age. We need to do something so that we are safer, and there's some things we can do. That's what my whole goal here to talk about is. So let's talk a little bit about what driving actually involves. Have you ever thought about that? You get behind the wheel of your car. What do you need to have in place? You need to be strong enough to manage your vehicle, flexible enough to look around your vehicle. You need to be able to see what's going on, hear what's going on. You need to actually be able to feel your foot on the gas and the brake pedal, right? Have you ever thought about all the stuff that goes on with driving? There's a lot of things. Now, I have made a whole new group of friends. Law enforcement was where I did my first 2 years of stuff related to this, and they have given me a ton of feedback, including the number of times they have pulled someone over who has a stick to drive with. They use a stick on the gas and they use a stick on the brake, and it's not the official designated one by like occupational therapy people. This is one that they just go down to Menards and get a yardstick or something like that. And they said these people are not safe drivers. So we need to think about that. We need to have an intact nervous system, and we also need to be able to process information. And where I went out to law enforcement was to talk about cognitive ability to drive. And one of the things many of us worry about is that person who doesn't, they're so confused they can't drive. At the end of today, we'll talk about if you're worried about that cognitively impaired driver, how you can identify them and what you can do with them. But in the meantime, I just want to talk about first driving, and then what happens to that driving ability as we get older. Any of you got aches and pains? Stiff joints. The reason I'm on the chair right now is I need a knee replacement, and I just don't seem to have time do what they need me to do. And when the surgeon canceled the appointment, I never got another one since then. So I'm kind of limping around a little bit. But ultimately, if you think about it, you need that strength and flexibility. That goes as we get older, unless we do something about it. We need the ability to feel our hands and our feet. We need to be able to see what's going on. We need to be able to see well what's going on. We also need to be able to process information. And guess what happens as we get older? All of those things get a little slower, a little less effective. Our cognitive processes actually start to slow down. Any of you need to put sticky notes places to figure out where you're supposed to go? Any of you wear a name tag so you know who you are? Yeah, those are kind of the things to think about. We all slow down a little bit. Most of us are cognitively intact to be out and about driving a car, doing activities of daily living. But as we get older and older and older, that ability gets slower and slower and less able. And we all know someone who gets lost between the bathroom and the living room, right? And yet some of those people are still out driving their cars. And we all probably complain about them a little bit. We know that by about age 85, 50% of the people's cognitive ability is not adequate enough to actually manage a vehicle. And that doesn't say when you turn 85 you can't drive anymore. Because some people's cognitive ability drops by the time they're 65, and some people have cognitive ability that's wonderful when they're 105. COVID has hugely impacted this. How many of you have heard of brain fog? They're starting to study brain fog related to COVID and how is that impacting driving. And they're wondering if that brain fog clears so that if we have someone we say, you know, right now you're too confused to drive, we're not going to allow you to drive anymore, can they retest that person after a while and find that that fog has cleared and they can go back to driving. Typically when someone develops dementia or Alzheimer's, when they progress to the point that they're not able to drive anymore, they don't get their license back. But with COVID, they're not sure exactly yet. So this cognitive intactness is a huge part of being able to drive. And we'll talk a little bit about that later on. And in fact, we can talk about some of the signs and symptoms. Maybe you recognize these things. Someone who's stressed will freeze up. They may stutter, just not do anything. Law enforcement finds many of our seniors that are, they got in the car with muscle memory and started driving, and then they got so stressed they couldn't drive anymore, and they just stopped their car. And they can't answer questions, they can't respond to things, they can't get out of the situation, but they're freezing. And it's not just in the car. You may see this in their general living and getting around. They may be lost or appear lost. What law enforcement has found is often when you address someone's cognitive impairment, the person will get angry or very anxious about it and start fighting with you about it. Think about dealing with a senior in your life. Have you run into these people with cognitive impairment and you go, oh yeah, I watched Grandpa do that when I mentioned maybe he should give up the keys or maybe he shouldn't be out driving the tractor and things like that. You may find them searching for words. You may find them having trouble remembering names, unable to find things. I have had many law enforcement fellows share with me that they've had seniors report their car stolen. Turns out they forgot where they parked it. And it's just like, oh my goodness. But they get to the point they recognize these kind of things. And it's part of the aging. And it's one of those things that we need to be more aware of. We're all aging because it beats the alternative, just going to say it. You know, everybody's getting older in this room, I'm just going to say it is. But many people with cognitive impairment also can hide it really very well. They've actually seen sticky notes on the dashboard that says brake, gas, brake, because they can't remember where things are. And we all do things like that to hide that cognitive impairment. Driving-wise, as we age a little bit, these changes affect how we can drive. We get a lot more overwhelmed with a lot of stimuli. As I was driving through Rochester, going, okay, now where do I need to turn? I'm looking for 9th. Well, I forgot to put 9th northeast, and I'm busy turning 9th southeast. But the one thing I did to help myself was I turned the radio off, because the radio was one more stimuli that was like going, okay, I got all these cars, I got all these traffic, there's road construction, and then those goofy geese were crossing the road down by the pond, and there was a truck coming. But it's easy to get distracted. As we get older, we find that it's harder to judge distances and speeds of other vehicles. So when you see someone coming at you, is it safe to make that turn in front of you? As we get older, it gets harder and harder to recognize unsafe situations. And all of a sudden you're in the middle of something and you go, oh, now what do I do type things. The good news is this trouble reading street and road signs is getting better because our driver, our OTS folks out and DPS folks, the Department of Public Safety, they're making the road signs bigger so we can at least see those. But it used to be you couldn't see the road signs. So we're working with the organization called Towards Zero Death to improve the ability for us to drive, and we're out there. But ultimately, as we age, our driving ability is affected, and it has to do with those aging things. Now, don't consider it a complete downer. We'll talk about how you can adjust for these. But what would you think if you got a little bit of cognitive impairment if you suddenly came across that sign? How quickly could you read all of those signs and react to all those signs and know what it is that you're supposed to do? How many of you hate that yellow blinking arrow? Yeah, that's my least favorite arrow, and I see you guys have got these. It's like, it's okay to turn as long as you know it's safe. But how quickly can you turn and how safe is it? And how many of you hate road construction? Road construction, they find, is the #1 challenge for seniors. There's too much stuff coming at you. The road is no longer the road we normally drive. And many times you find that those of us who are, having a little challenge already, we run into any of these, we feel like this. How many of you adjust where you drive so that you don't have to get into situations like this? How many of you avoid roundabouts because you hate them? Yeah, I know exactly. We'll talk a little bit about those. But ultimately, aging and distraction becomes one of those challenges. So we have to start figuring out how do we adjust for those. And that's kind of the thing that I'll talk a little bit about as we go through the rest of the session here. Some of the other things that we see with aging is we don't always have the strength and flexibility to brake or accelerate. How many of you right now can look over your left shoulder to check for the car that's coming in your blind spot? Yeah, some of you can, some of you can't. I will talk about adjusting your mirrors so you have a better visual of what's going on. As I mentioned, some people don't know if their foot's on the gas or on the brake because they have no sensation in their feet. Difficulty checking for traffic. Slower responding. I'll give you one more statistic in just a minute that talks why we get in more crashes. And it has to do with our reflexes being much slower than we were. And then there's the missed auditory or visual signals that are going on. One of the things you saw on the bottom was that NRP, I'm still registered as a paramedic, and I actually worked the streets as well. Not only did I work the ER, I worked on the streets as an ambulance driver, as my dad used to call us. But people wouldn't pull over when we're going lights and siren places, or they would get confused and they would just jam on the brake. And it's like, our worst case scenario. And often it was because they couldn't hear that siren until it's like all of a sudden right there and they didn't know what to do and they panicked. And we see crashes because of those kind of things. So there's a variety of different things that affect our driving to the point that they've actually found aging between the physical and the cognitive changes can make us drive as if we're drunk, truly drunk. And when the officers pull someone over for what appears to be drunk driving, and they realize that that person's not actually drunk, but just cognitively impaired or too confused, we have actually come up with a situation in Minnesota where law enforcement are carrying these little pocket cards, and I have some if anybody wants some if you'd like to use them on your spouse, but it actually helps them to determine if the driver is cognitively intact enough to keep driving, and if they're not, they will get them a ride home. Because what happens is if they have a really confused person, and you don't have to be old, just a confused person, up behind a wheel, and they get into another situation, they may end up in a crash. Or they have found many of these people parked in a ditch or in a field or in the pond, and they're dead in the vehicle simply because they do not know how to get out of the situation. So there's a variety of different ways to look at what happens as we get older. But what I want to do is give you some ideas what you can do to be a safer driver. By the way, aging is not the only thing. Your medical problems can add into driving conditions as well. And I'm not going to go through each and every one of these because you've got some great parish nurses. They can talk about how they affect things. Ultimately, it doesn't matter what your physical or cognitive change is, as long as if your doctor puts you on medication and you know how well the medication affects your driving, and you know how well or how much your condition changes your driving, you can keep driving. Just because you've got an irregular heart doesn't mean you should stop driving, but you need to know how it affects your driving. Just because you may have low blood sugar sometimes doesn't mean you have to stop driving, but you need to make sure you keep your blood sugar under control or your blood pressure under control. So ultimately, medical conditions as well as medications can affect your driving on top of cognitive changes. So awareness of things that affect our driving are things that we want to keep in mind. One more study. Blame it all on Joan. I did find a study done by, I believe it was AAA or AARP, one of the two, that ultimately did a timing thing. Drivers 55 and older were 8 seconds slower reacting to in-vehicle technology than millennials. 8 seconds. So your car starts binging at you. Mine does this. Mine will go bing, bing, bing. Oh, what the heck? And I look around going, what's it telling me about it? It says, the dashboard goes, it's 39 degrees. There might be ice on the road. Yeah. I go, you know what, maybe not so much, and I really don't care because I know what's going on. But it takes me, it's not like I know automatically what it is. Or how many of you got your seat vibrates because you get too close to the white line type of a thing? Those are all of the different things that takes us longer than the millennial to figure out what the heck is going on. So just one more little deal. The last little deal to think about is as we get older, we get a little bit more frail. Physiologically, we are not as strong and sturdy as we were when we were teenagers. When we get in a crash, we break easier and we don't tolerate that crash as well. And in fact, the complications from crashes often end up killing seniors. So it's not necessarily that we die on the scene. We die from the broken hip. Later, we die from the sepsis. Later, we die from the pneumonia. Later, we die from the blood clot in our lung later. And it's just we don't recover as well. So we're at risk, guys and gals. We're at risk when we're driving. And even though we've got the car as the armor, like Don Quixote, how many of you eat food out of a dented tin can? You know, that's kind of what's happening. The car protects us, but we still end up with some damaged goods inside. So we want to do some things to keep us a little safer. One last slide. Age 75 is when we start to see the death rate go up. Age 75 is also when you see a lot of people decide to not drive anymore. Now, I'm not saying when you hit 75 you need to stop, but if you're feeling like your vision isn't good enough, your strength isn't good enough, your cognition isn't good enough, you've got a lot of medical conditions going on, you may want to start changing how you drive or thinking about retiring from driving. And you're going, oh my goodness, she's going to talk about giving up keys. No, actually, now I'm going to change to how can you not have to give up the keys, all right? You don't want to be a statistic. You want to be aware of what's going on, and you want to take some steps. So, yeah, I guess you could see it from Waybar. We're going to dive into these 7 things that can help decrease your risks. Because that's what you want to know, right? I'll lay you odds, half of you are doing half of these things already. You just didn't realize you're making your driving a little bit safer. So the first thing to think about is plan ahead. Where are you going? When are you going? If it's just a trip to the grocery store, it's one thing, because usually it's a trip to the store and back. But what if you're going to go visit somebody up in the cities? Do they know when you're going to get there? Joan was pacing. She was like, where is that woman? She was going to be here at 11:45. Do I need to send highway patrol out after her? Is she in a ditch someplace? You know? And it's a reasonable thing to have somebody know when you should be there, because if nobody knows to go looking for you, you may be dead in a ditch somewhere. When I was coming down here, I actually Google mapped. Do you Google map where you're going? Do you know what the road is looking like? Now, unfortunately, they didn't have the road closed over here on 9th. So it's like, oh, now I have to figure out how can I get around. And my car doesn't talk to me. I don't have Siri saying, readjusting, readjusting, readjusting. But those are the things. Know where you're going. Know if you can avoid road construction. I know that I couldn't avoid the road construction on 52. I had to add in extra time for that. Do y'all carry your cell phones? I don't want you talking on your cell phones when you're driving. But if something bad happens, you should be able to call for help. And that's the good news, is nowadays we can do that. Look at the road conditions. Is it even safe to be out on the road? Is it going to be dark when you're driving? How many of you used to go out for dinner all the time? Yeah, it's a lot of you. How many of you stopped driving at night? Yeah, a lot of us go, you know what, I don't see real well at night. And if I have a choice between doing a day thing versus doing an evening thing, I'm going to do the day thing. One of my friends and I used to get together for dinner all the time. Then we switched it to lunch, then we realized it was dark at lunchtime, or not lunchtime, we used to get together for breakfast. We realized it was dark at breakfast, so now we get together for lunch. But you adjust your schedule. If the roads are going to be crummy and you don't really need to be where you're going, don't be on the roads. Be safe, be smart. If you can avoid road construction, do that. And I'll mention medications and alcohol here, and I'm going to mention it again. Is it safe for you to be driving? Think about, is there a distraction in your vehicle? Drinking is a distraction, and I'm not talking alcohol, I'm talking your coffee, your soda, your whatever. Are you using any drugs that are going to make you not safe? Are you distracted because there's a lot of conversation going on? Are you a little confused about what's happening? Is your brain even in the right place to drive? Are you upset about something? Are you sleepy? Are you not feeling well? Those are going to put you at a higher risk of being in a crash simply because it takes longer to respond to emergencies. And that's the key. We always want to be able to be ready to respond. One of the little tests I came across that I kind of like, there's a variety of different, am I in the right frame of mind tests that are out there, but one of them that was only A through F questions long was, do I get honked at a lot? Do people pass me? That gives you a clue. Maybe you're not driving the way that everybody else is. And I do realize those young people all have heavy feet, and we all do get passed a lot, and we all should be doing the speed limit. And I'm going to tell you guys, we consider this the 100 deadliest days of the year right now, starting June 1st through the end of fall is when there's a lot of people killed on the roads. Minnesota Highway Patrol got a grant this year to be out on the road and start pulling people over for speeding. So I would recommend drive the speed limit. Some people have asked me, well, do you have an inside straight into how fast we can go over the speed limit without a ticket? The line I always hear is, and don't say you got it from me, I'll give you 5, but at 9 you're mine. So just saying. You want to do the speed limit. They're there for a reason. Do you find yourself stopping for green lights instead of red lights? I still remember sitting at a stop sign for 3 minutes one day waiting for it to turn green. And it's like, are you seeing things like that? Are you yelling at other people for the way they drive? Or do cars suddenly appear from out of nowhere? Or my favorite, do people not want to ride with you? Gives you a clue what kind of driving you are, and you may need to do something to be a safer driver. I do have some of the quizzes that the folks from AAA put out, and basically it's just you go through the questions and you determine, am I a good driver, am I a medium driver, or am I a sucky driver? And then it gives you a list of things that you could do to change a little bit to go back to a good driver. Because ultimately we can change some of the things that we're doing, but a lot of times we've got bad habits. So we want to look at those and see what we can do to be safer when we're out there. If you don't like AAA, if you like to go online, NHTSA has a set, AARP has a set. I just found that this one pager works the easiest from AARP, or from AAA, so that's the one I make a copy of. Exercising your muscles. Remember I talked about weakness? Can make it hard to stop your vehicle, control your vehicle. Exercising, and if you're up and about and moving around, that's good. I do have a list of exercises that the Hartford Foundation put together, specifically for driving muscles. Because ultimately we need to be able to control that vehicle with our arms and with our legs. We need to be flexible enough so we can look over the shoulder, we can look over the other shoulder. So doing those exercises will help to make you a better driver. Just being active will help you being a better driver. And you guys are all here, so I'm probably preaching to the choir, but ultimately know that you've got a good reason to do that. Doing fun puzzles and things like that are another way to strengthen your brain and make your cognitive approach a little bit better. Exercising those brain muscles are something to think about. Avoiding distractions. I put that in again as a separate area because what they have found is the older we get, the harder it is for us to process a lot of information. So what you want to do is if you're coming into a situation when you're driving that requires paying attention and focusing on your driving, you need to focus on your driving. You don't need to be paying attention to the conversation that's going on behind you or in the radio. You shouldn't be putting food in your mouth. You shouldn't be drinking. You shouldn't be taking pictures, and there's all kinds of crazy stuff people are doing out on the road. One of the highway patrol guys said he actually had somebody playing a tuba while they were driving their car, and I'm going, I don't know how they did that. But basically, when you're behind the wheel of your vehicle, you should be focusing on driving. And if you're paying any attention to television right now, you're going to see a ton of commercials right now, public service announcements that we'll talk about. When you drive and pay attention. Because as I mentioned, it's the 100 deadliest days out there. The other thing to consider is how are you positioned in your vehicle? Are you safe in your vehicle? Have any of you heard of CarFit or been to CarFit? Looks like not. CarFit is a program that was put together by the occupational therapy people, and ultimately what they do is make sure that when you're in your car, you fit it. It's a free thing, and I actually just came down here about a month ago, and we did do a CarFit event just right down Broadway here a little bit at the occupational therapy thing. It takes about 20 minutes. And ultimately, the person that you drive up to looks to see, is your seat positioned in the right place? Are you positioned safe enough away from your wheel that when the airbag deploys, it doesn't hit you in the chin, but it hits you in the chest, and you're 10 inches away from that steering wheel? Because if you're closer than that, ultimately there's enough force that it can break your ribs. If the steering wheel is tilted so that that bag comes up and hits you in the chin, it goes like, it can break your neck, because remember, our bones are getting a little bit more fragile. So making sure that you're 10 inches from your steering wheel and the steering wheel is tilted more up and down rather than this way is one of the things to consider. The other thing to consider is your seat high enough so you can see over your steering wheel. We see the little people driving, looking between the steering wheel and the dash. Have you seen those? Their seat needs to be higher, and if they can't get it higher, many of them actually raise up. A cushion will help to get them seeing over the steering wheel. The other thing to be considering is, can they reach the gas and the brake pedal? So it's that balance of close enough and far enough away. And a lot of folks don't realize that your steering wheel can actually move in and out. So it's like, do you need to push the steering wheel in closer so that your seat can be a little closer? Lastly, look at where his headrest is, right behind his ears. Does your headrest fit where it needs to be? Because that's going to help your neck if you get into a crash so that your head doesn't go flying back over the seat. So just being positioned appropriately is good. I did bring the 12 steps that the CarFit people check for when you're there. But if you ever see someone offering a CarFit clinic, say, hey, can I sign up? Because they'll quickly fit you in your vehicle. And what I will tell you is, ladies, if you've got a taller spouse, you've got to readjust the seat for you so it's safe for you, and then unadjusted for your spouse. If you've got a position 1, position 2 in your vehicle, the seat and everything, that's a really good thing, because ultimately, if you are like I was, my husband was a head taller than I was not safe if I was driving in his position in the vehicle. I had to readjust everything and then listen to him complain. But it is what it is. How many of you learned to drive a 10 and 2? Yeah, we all learned to drive 10 and 2. They found out that's probably the worst thing now with airbags. What happens is, as the airbag deploys, if you're grabbing the steering wheel like this, it breaks your thumb off. So you want to get your hand down around 8 and 4, and you want to put your thumb against the steering wheel rather than around the steering wheel. The other thing that they will tell you about is the burns you get, and you have less burning if your hands are down here than if your hands are up here. So that's a huge thing for us to change, because we all drove like this. In fact, as the last group told me, is actually they drove like this, one-handed with the wrist. How many of you have adjusted your mirrors? Yeah. Did they teach you the best way to adjust your mirrors when you bought your car? Because what we have learned is if you adjust your mirrors so that you're only seeing the back corner of your vehicle, you have decreased the amount of blind spots significantly. I think I have sheets that talk about how to adjust your mirrors, but ultimately it's just a case of you lean against your against your window, you look in the mirror, and if all you see is the back corner of your car, then lean over the selector, I always called it the Fernando, and looked in the mirror and just saw the back corner of your car, you would have a much less chance of missing the vehicle coming on this side or on this side. You decrease your blind spot. So that's one of those things to consider. I think I have some of those with me. Seat belts. Do y'all wear your seat belt, and do you wear it correctly? We see a lot of people wearing just the lap part, and they put the chest part behind their shoulder. They're designed so that they keep you in the seat. And unfortunately, a lot of times in us shorter people, it goes against our neck. What folks don't realize is you can actually, there's a clip on the back, on the frame here. You can lower that belt. That seat belt should be right across your collarbone and connect over here. Needs to be under your belly so it's against your hip. And I know maybe I'm, again, preaching to the choir, but we find a lot of people wear their seat belt up here and they're not using this one here because ultimately it's uncomfortable. The other excuse I hear is I have a pacemaker and I don't want to wreck my pacemaker. So I went in and looked at the studies, and guess what? Pacemakers are stronger than seat belts. You need to wear them. And in fact, I kind of chuckled. The cardiologist actually noted that St. Peter does not give you extra points if you didn't have your seatbelt on because of your pacemaker. So just saying, if it's uncomfortable, there's things you can wrap around the seatbelt right here to kind of cushion it, but using your seatbelt is going to keep you in your seat and keep you the safest. Because remember, our bones are getting brittle, and those seatbelts are designed so that they keep us from moving around. The really old cars, the seatbelts sometimes broke the ribs, and so you may say, well, I read that report that seatbelts break the ribs. They've actually fixed them so they give a little bit now. So you stop it, they give a little bit. So those seatbelts keep you from being ejected from your vehicle, keep you from being smashed into the steering wheel, keep you from being smashed into the windshield, and ultimately keep you safe. So wearing your seatbelt and wearing it appropriately. And you might go, well, duh. But guess how many people are killed don't have their seatbelts on? It's huge. So here's just another commercial for CarFit, car-fit.org. If you went online, you can actually watch them do an assessment. So if you didn't want to go in and have somebody check off the little boxes, you can actually watch them do a CarFit event. But truly, if you fit in your vehicle, you will find that you are safer when you are in that vehicle and driving. Those classes. How many of you have taken the class to get your insurance? Many of you? Yeah, go ahead and do it. Good job, good job. It doesn't matter who you go to, ARP, AAA, National Safety Council, the community education people all offer them. You get a discount on your insurance with most of them. What I will tell you is I've learned you need to shop around. Some are really expensive and some are really cheap. I've also heard, and I think they passed and signed it into law, that if you haven't taken it, remember you used to have to take an 8-hour class and then a 4-hour class, they got it cut down to 4 hours for the first time now. So I'm looking for that, and getting in and taking that safety course will keep you updated with what's going on. You know, plus it saves you some money. That's always good. Make sure your vehicle's in good condition, because this one probably is not. My little brother's been yelling at me. I've got a crack across my windshield. He says, if you get in a rollover, your car is not going to be stable. I go, yeah, I can, I know. But I don't sit still long enough to have Safelite come and replace the windshield. But you want to make sure your vehicle is in good condition when you're out driving so that you don't end up needing to have it make you safe. I'll mention one more time, is it safe for me to drive? What medications are you on? And a lot of people think it's just like the muscle relaxers, the pain pills, the sleeping pills, things like that, that can make you drowsy when you're driving. The reality of it is the law does not say drowsy. The law says you need to be able to keep in control of your vehicle. If you've got a diabetic condition where your blood sugar drops up and down and all of a sudden you can pass out, if you've got a seizure condition where you suddenly can seize, if you have a blood pressure condition or a heart condition where suddenly your blood pressure can drop and you lose consciousness, or your heart rate drops and you lose consciousness, those are things you need to be aware of and know how your medications affect you before you get behind the wheel, because you need to be in control of your vehicle all the time. Now, the prescription ones everybody gets, but how many of you think about the over-the-counter drugs? They can cause just as many symptoms as a prescription drug. And how many of you absolutely and positively believe herbals are so safe nothing bad can happen? Herbals and supplements can cause exactly the same symptoms. And when I say symptoms, it's the side effect of your medication if it's prescription. They can make you sleepy. They can make you have not coordination. They can have you lose consciousness if you take them and not aware of how they work. So be aware of medications and how they can affect your driving. Can they make it so that you are not safe to drive? And then there's cannabis. The weed of today, guys, is not the weed of our youth. Just gonna say. I shouldn't say we knew, because I never inhaled, but I had friends, you know. We knew the onset was gonna be right away and what it was gonna do for you. What we're finding is the onset today is a lot stronger because it's a lot stronger cannabis if you're smoking or vaping it. But the challenge we're finding is a lot of folks like the little gummies. And they anticipate that the effect of the gummy is going to be as fast as the old inhaling, and it's not. It sometimes takes 45 minutes before the effect of the cannabis gummy kicks in. And because it didn't kick in right away, what we're finding is people will take 2 or 3 gummies because, well, it hasn't worked yet, I must need more. And it kicks in 45 minutes to an hour later. So I'm not saying don't use cannabis. What I'm saying is, before you get in, you're behind the wheel, know how it's going to affect you for at least 2 hours, because it's going to take that long to kick in. And impaired driving is impaired driving. I will tell you the state of Minnesota is currently testing spit tests that they can identify how much cannabis you have on board. They're not going to be able to charge you right now, but they're piloting to see how accurate they are, so they can now test for cannabis. Just be on the lookout, be aware. So did you notice I just went through 7 things you should do before you drive that can make you safer? I kind of did. We're not done. We got lots to go. So plan ahead so that you know that you're going to be safe out there. Ask yourself, am I safe to drive right now? Make sure you're exercising your driving muscles, not only the physical ones, but the mental ones. Limit the amount of distractions. Make sure you fit in the car correctly and wear your seatbelt, and consider, are you being affected by meds or alcohol? But the last one I've started to add now is make a plan how you will retire. That's not saying you have to quit today, but what would I do if I couldn't drive my car right now? The reason I don't have a new knee is because they told me I couldn't drive for 6 weeks after my surgery. And I'm going, I guess I'll put up with my knee that doesn't work rather than not driving for 6 weeks after my surgery, because I knew that I would need to be driving and it just wasn't going to work. But so what would I do if suddenly I couldn't drive? How was I going to get around? Who can I call? Those are some things to think about. What can I do if I can't drive? How many of you plan your retirement from working? I didn't do a very good job of it, as you can tell, since I now have 4 part-time jobs. But you plan your retirement from working. How do you plan your retirement from driving? Here's the other thing I learned from folks as I was out talking with you, is there's a peer pressure to continue driving. How many of you that drive are asked by others, well, can you take me too? You can drive, can you take us? We want you to drive. And how many of you feel uncomfortable being responsible for other people in your vehicles? Yeah, I see some hands going up now. How many of you have been asked by your kids to pick up your grandkids from school? Are you supported when you say, you know what, I'm okay with driving myself, but I'm not real comfortable driving other people? And I think we need to start supporting each other with that idea that maybe we shouldn't be driving other folks around. I will tell you another piece of statistics. The most common contributing factor to crashes in people our age are failure to yield right away and improper turning and merging. And that makes really perfectly good sense, but you notice 3 out of 5 of the crashes that were fatal or serious accidents. And I hate that they call it serious A's, but that's how the state calls them right now. They haven't changed it to serious C's, serious crashes. But they involve older drivers at intersections or exchanges. So how can we be safer? You know, one of them is being aware, but recognizing it's our aging process that puts us at this risk. So here's what we call as a T-bone. What do you think it looks like inside the car? Looks like this. If you have all of the airbags deployed when you're in a T-bone, you as the driver will have that pillow on the left side and protect your head. But if you've got a passenger on your right side, even if they're seatbelted, they're still gonna bang over and hit you. If you are the driver and got hit on your side, you're gonna bang over and hit the passenger. We find a lot of the airbags are useful, but they're not 100%. If they completely filled our car up with air, maybe we'd be safer. But ultimately know that we want to decrease the number of T-bone crashes. So where do you think that's going to lead me to? Oh, those roundabouts. So as much as you all hate roundabouts, what we have found is it has significantly reduced the number of deaths due to T-bone crashes, simply because you don't have one car banging into the side of the other. The key with doing roundabouts, let's see if we can do this without messing it up, is, here's this little arrow showing up. As you're driving in, all you really need to worry about, oh no, you don't see the little arrow. All you really need to worry about, you're driving in, what's coming from that lane right over there? Don't worry about this car, don't worry about this car. I'm driving in, if there's nobody there, go ahead and go. If you're gonna go right into this lane, just go right in. If you're gonna go that way, if you're gonna go that way, get in, get to the center, go all the way around, and there. And if you forgot where you were going, go in, go around, and go around again. But what we have found is the roundabouts actually automatically slow people down, so the energy involved is way less, and ultimately we're not getting those T-bone crashes. The other interesting one is when you come up down 52, the J turns. Have you any seen those? You get out, what they found was happening is that you were coming off the rural road, you're going over 52, and you were going to try to beat the truck coming, and people were getting killed. So if you get on, you go up, you go like this, and then you turn. They totally eliminated the T-bone. The J-turn, as crazy as it looks, is one of our other safer things. So between these two, the big challenge that I saw with roundabouts is people are too busy looking at what's coming at them. The good roundabouts have bushes and trees in the center, so you can't see what's coming at you. Because all you really need to worry about is that car in the left side. There's nothing coming, go ahead and go. They're not hard. I'm getting used to them. How many of you ever heard take 3 rights instead of a left? Yeah, a lot of delivery places are saying that because that left-hand turn is, you see, you're waiting, you try to take a left-hand turn, boom, you get T-boned. So if you can do a right, you usually have more control going across. I realize there's still that risk going across, you can get T-boned, but that left turn is the biggest challenge. And in fact, the flashing left turn arrow, which they feel has improved movement, has probably been this thing that I've seen the most number of seniors killed at, simply because there's 2 things happening. One is we can't see beyond the vehicle in the other left turn lane to see what's coming. And number two, we don't know how long it takes us to get our foot from the brake to the gas. That's quick, but now you've got to get the car accelerating. How long does it take you to get the car going and make that left turn? A lot of us are afraid to sit and wait until we get the green arrow. Because what's happening with the guy behind us that can actually see beyond the car that we can't. My pet peeve is when I go over to church, I have to take a left turn on a really busy road that it's higher on this side than on where I am. And if there's a van sitting right here, I can't see the traffic coming, and the traffic coming is at 50 miles an hour. If I make a slow turn, what's going to happen? I'm going to get nailed. So I will sit there, and the guy behind me can honk. I'm not doing any one-fingered salutes, just saying. He can honk all he wants until I get my green arrow. Because the reality of it is, I know it takes me longer to get my car started and going around that hill. And I want to be safe rather than dead. Because dead's not fun. Just going to say. And hurt real bad's worse than dead sometimes, I think. So flashing left arrows is one of my pet peeves. I actually looked this up. This is how fast people are going. So at my street where it's 50 miles an hour where they're coming at me, that car is moving 584 feet per 8 seconds. And remember a long time ago I told you we're slower by 8 seconds? So it's like, how fast is that other vehicle coming at me? And recognize our reaction time is slower, and sometimes we need to be safe rather than sorry. Merging. Remember I just got done talking about blind spots and mirrors? Adjust your mirrors so that you can see what's coming, and know that you put your blinker on, you're asking permission to come on the road, and you're hoping the people behind that are coming will give you a little bit of space. But sometimes they don't, sometimes they just don't let you in. But merging is becoming a better culture of let's do what we need to. Zipper merging is actually starting to work. People do know how to zipper merge, they just don't know how to zipper merge with their car. If you ever watch people at a conference, there's a whole lot of people needing to go up on an escalator, they all zipper merge. You watch. They don't all stack up. I mean, they do, but they let people in, But boy, get behind a wheel of a car, no. So we need to work on zipper merging, but putting your blinker on and then indicating you want to go in will help. So we've got a couple of minutes left. Enough things to kind of give you an idea of what you all can be a safer driver. You're going to do things. So what if you're worried about somebody else's driving? You aren't worried about anybody else's driving, are you out there? Exactly. So you probably know all of the behaviors you've seen. Those that are making the left-hand turns, getting into trouble, or trouble getting into the correct lane, or turning in front of other vehicles, or driving on the wrong side of the road. How many of you try to avoid the car that's got all the dents on the sides? Yeah, you see that car, oh, I gotta get away from that one, they're all scraped up. Or the person, we knew Grandma had to give up her license because the whole side of the garage was just all dinged up and the mailbox kept getting knocked over, things like that. Those are behaviors that make you go, how are they doing with their driving? So what do you do with them? So remember I mentioned already the tool that I gave law enforcement. You can objectively gauge someone's cognitive ability. It's called the Driver Orientation Screen for Cognitive Impairment. We call it DOSI for short. The cops say, oh, let's do the DOSI today. And ultimately, the DOSI asks these 9 questions. What's your date of birth? What's your full address? What state are we in now? What city are we in? Sometimes that gets a little dicey with the cities all merging together. What time is it? What day of the week is it? And what's the date? And you might think, oh, I don't know what the date is. Am I failing this test? Well, guess what? Studies show that if you can answer all but 2 of those questions, you're cognitively intact enough to still drive. Yay, so I'm okay, I can still drive out there. If I'm getting 3 or 4 of those questions wrong, I'm probably not making the best decisions while I'm driving. Now, it may be because a cop just pulled me over. And cops are not allowed to use this based on age. They use this based on driving behaviors. And this can be used on any age person. And in fact, it says right on the directions, you can also use it for bicyclists and walkers. So you can do cognitive assessment on anybody using this card. And on the back, it gives these little scoring tools. And you might say, well, so who made this up? University of California, San Diego. This is an evidence-based study. That's why I chose it. So the 3 to 4 wrong answer people might be okay to drive their car, but not right now. So we tell law enforcement, get them home safely. If they're getting more than 5 wrong, they are probably confused enough they shouldn't be trying to drive a car, because it takes an intact cognitive brain to drive that vehicle. Law enforcement for both of these folks have been instructed to get them to safety. Call a family member, take them home. I've had lots of stories from law enforcement who said, thank you for the objective tool, because it helped us with our gut sense that this person shouldn't be driving, but that doesn't fix the problem. Part 2 is they need to report the driver. And you guys can all report the driver as well, and I'll tell you how you can do that in just a second. The other one that currently right now I think it's like I'm almost failing this one is how well do they move? Remember, you need to be able to move. You need to be able to put your foot on the gas. You need to put your foot on the brake. You need to be able to get in and out of the vehicle. You need to be able to steer. Are you safe driving physically as well as mentally? And if you're worried about that other driver, these are some things you go, this doesn't seem good. What can I do about it? So here are some things to think about. 1, just ask them, do you think it's time to not drive? And some of them are going to snarl and say, oh, I'm going to keep driving. And some of them say, oh, thanks for bringing it up. Can you help me get around? Sometimes it just takes that. Maybe you can just get them a ride for right now. Maybe you can recommend non-driving options. Do you guys still have that weird little tram that goes around? Yeah, I mean, what are there? No, yes, no. What are the other options that are out there? Provide resources for them. Then the next one, request a referral for evaluation. Ooh, this is the scary one. Turn them into the state. We'll talk about that. The other one you can do is ask about a driving rehabilitation specialist. That's an occupational therapist who has extra training on how to be a safe driver and how you can be a safer driver. And they can do a really awesome evaluation. So if you're worried about someone, you just screen them for I'm concerned. Now what you want to do is think about, what can I do to have someone screen them better and test them better? You also can send them to their docs, but honestly guys, your docs don't have time to do a good assessment. The driver rehabilitation specialist, the occupational therapist, can actually check physical skills, cognitive skills, driving skills. Often this is covered by insurance. Not always, but often it's covered by insurance. If you're worried about somebody, I would check with these guys. See if you can get them an appointment. I would even consider getting them an appointment before I went and reported them to the state. Because guess what the state often ends up doing? Sending them to this guy or this gal. The request for examination of driver is a form that's online. If you're worried about someone's driving and you're afraid to talk with them about it, you can actually go to the state and say, I need some help. I'm worried about so-and-so's driving. This is the specific activity that I'm worried about that I have seen. You cannot just say, failed the dosing. We checked with them, they said no. But ultimately you turn that form into the state, and anybody can turn it in, by the way. I think I've got a slide that says who's protected versus not. But ultimately what will happen is the driver and vehicular services folks, if the form is filled out correctly, will pull that person in and have a talk with them, and they will screen them again to determine should they be anything from, next slide, anything from retested to being seen by the doc to no, they look like they're perfectly okay to drive, or you know what? We think they need to have their licenses taken away. But ultimately, they don't know about bad drivers unless someone turns in that form. The thing is with the form, well, keep going, cars. The thing is with the form is if you are a family member, they will not share the name. If you are a physician, they will not share the name. If you are just a friend or a nurse or someone from the parish, and you fill out the form because you're concerned about someone, if that someone says, "Who turned me in?" they actually by law have to release the name of the person who turned you in. So there's the upside downside of that. But ultimately, if you feel you need someone to back you up on someone's driver, there is a process that you can follow through with that related to the Driver Vehicular Services Group. So ultimately, because we're about out of time, driving is not an all or none. Have you kind of figured it out? Have you noticed it was like I was talking about all the things you can do to be safer, but sometimes there's some people that are not safe enough. We do, or I should say, I recognize your independence depends on being able to drive or get around, and that's the really hard part. And I can get into all kinds of fights with different people, and it's fun as I travel across the whole state. This discussion about what do you do about licenses. I've had some people say, well, you should just take their license away when they're 65 no matter what. And then it's like, oh, you know. And other people say, well, no, they have to be this old or this old. And I said, you know, it really depends upon how the person is functioning. So we need to be able to assess them and yet keep them really, really independent and yet keep them very, very safe. What I will tell you is that there are a ton of resources related to senior drivers out there. If you want to look up a lot of the different things that I talked about, if you go to the Minnesota Emergency Nurses Association page, www.minnesotaena.com, if you hit the pink button for driver safety materials, we have all the materials there. We have videos there that you can watch. We did a lot of things to provide you with information. I'm almost ready to do to post the videos. I have done 8-minute videos of this talk that people can go to YouTube and watch. So we're almost ready to put those on. That's been part of the grant work that I've been doing. But ultimately, number one, thank you for listening. Number two, if you're interested in what I did bring with, as I mentioned, like the self-assessment, if somebody wants one of these, they're here. If you want some of the exercises, they're here. I also brought a list of the medications and the herbals. I have those. If you liked the 4 things that make you a bad driver and the 7 things you can do to be a good driver, I have that sheet here. If you want a form that helps you to plan how to retire from driving, I found that on the CDC. And I have a fun booklet called Driving Later in Life that the state of Minnesota puts out. One of the biggest challenges I found was there's a ton of resources, but it's hard to figure out where they all are. And when I put them on the website, it's like they're all collected. So all you have to do is click a link and you can get to any of them. And that way you don't have to take a whole lot of stuff home and set them on your table and say, I'll get to these one day. All you have to do is take home our website and say, hey, I'm kind of bored. Let's go to that ENA website and see what they've got. So I'll stop talking. If there's any questions, I'll give you the mic.
Does anybody have any questions for Joni?
It's not really a question.
Oh, it isn't really a question?
On off-ramps, sometimes the on-ramp is coming next to the off-ramp, and they'll put a sign up that'll say, do not enter. It's so confusing. Why don't they have an arrow on that sign?
That's a great comment, and they just got done having a workshop for all of the group in Minnesota that, like people like us that get together and look at road safety things called Towards Zero Death. We just got done having a workshop, and that was one of the very things that they identified, and they're talking about putting a sign on the back of that sign so that you know if you're going down it's like wrong way on this one, so you know what's going on. But that was one of the things they recently identified as, this is a hazard. We need to fix that. So good observation. Yeah.
Any more questions?
I have to have the microphone. On the double, when you're doing a roundabout, the one in the middle should go, not turn right in front of me.
The double roundabouts are a pain in the you-know-where, and the engineers are starting to realize that, but you're exactly right. So you truly do need to plan ahead. If you're going into a double one, if you are going to turn right away, you want to be in the farthest one to the right. If you're going to be going out on the far end, you want to be in the middle one so you can go all the way around and then come out. But the double ones they have found have been a challenge. And a lot of community, or the county engineers, are not putting in double ones anymore because they found it caused more problems.
She's going round and round.
Oh, yeah, oh, I know. Exactly.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions?
Let's give Joni a big hand.
Thanks, everyone. Be safe out there, and let's hope we don't get any severe storms, huh?